The wagon sat crooked in the ravine. One wheel snapped clean off, the canvas torn and flapping in the wind like a dying bird's wing. Jacob Thorne had been tracking the buzzards for an hour before he found it. 3 circles overhead, patient and knowing. He'd seen enough death in his 42 years to recognize its invitation. But when he climbed down into the wash, rifle in hand, what stopped him wasn't the overturned supplies or the dried blood streaked across the wooden frame. It was the sound, faint, rhythmic, breathing. He moved slow, boots crunching over shattered glass and scattered tins. The heat pressed down like a hand on his shoulders. Flies hummed thick in the air. He circled the wagon twice before he saw her, half buried beneath a wool blanket, face turned toward the sky, lips cracked and bleeding. "She's still breathing," he whispered to no one. Jacob knelt beside her, one hand hovering over the blanket. Her chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. Dust clung to her dark hair. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, stained rust brown. He couldn't tell if she was 16 or 26. Out here, the desert aged you fast. He reached down and pulled the blanket back. His blood ran cold. Her arms were bound at the wrists with leather cord, tight enough to leave grooves in the skin. But that wasn't what froze him. It was the brand on her forearm, a crude circle with a jagged line through it, still red and blistered, fresh, maybe a day old. And beneath it, carved into the pale inside of her wrist in thin, deliberate strokes, "Property of Cade Harrow." Jacob's jaw tightened. He knew that name. Everyone in 3 territories knew it. Cade Harrow didn't lose things, and he sure as hell didn't let them go. The girl's eyes fluttered open, gray, unfocused, wide with terror. She tried to scream, but all that came out was a dry rasp. Her body jerked against the bindings, panicked, animal. "Easy," Jacob said, voice low. "Easy now. I'm not him." She stared at him like she didn't believe a word, like she'd stopped believing in anything soft a long time ago. He pulled his knife and cut the cords. Her wrists bled where the leather had bit in. She didn't move, just lay there, trembling, watching him with those hollow gray eyes. "Can you walk?" She didn't answer. Jacob glanced back toward the ridge where his horse waited. He could leave her, ride north, pretend he'd never seen the wagon, never heard her breathing. It would be the smart thing, the safe thing. But Jacob Thorne had spent the last 10 years trying to forget the man he used to be, and that man would have ridden away. He slid one arm beneath her shoulders and lifted her like she weighed nothing at all. "I got you," he said quietly. She didn't fight, didn't speak, just let him carry her up out of that ravine, into the fading light, into whatever came next. Jacob's ranch sat 5 miles west of Redemption, tucked into a valley where the cottonwoods grew thick along the creek. It wasn't much, a 2-room cabin, a barn that leaned slightly south, a corral that needed mending. But it was his, quiet, hidden, the kind of place a man could disappear into if he wanted. He laid the girl on the cot in the back room and covered her with a clean quilt. She hadn't spoken a word during the ride, just clung to his jacket with white-knuckled hands, eyes locked on the horizon like she expected riders to come tearing over it any second. Jacob poured water from the pump and brought it to her in a tin cup. She drank like she'd forgotten what water tasted like. He watched her throat work, watched the way her hands shook when she lowered the cup. "What's your name?" She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, stared at him for a long time. "Anna," she finally whispered. Her voice was rough, broken glass underfoot. "Anna." He nodded. "I'm Jacob. You're safe here." Her laugh was bitter sharp. "No such thing." He didn't argue. She was probably right. That night, Jacob sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees and listened to the coyotes sing in the distance. He couldn't stop seeing that brand on her arm, couldn't stop hearing the way she'd said no such thing, like safety was a language she'd forgotten how to speak. By morning, word had already started to spread. Old Man Briggs rode up before noon, hat in his hands, eyes nervous, Heard you brought someone back from the flats. Jacob didn't look up from the fence post he was hammering. News travels fast. It does when it's Cade Harrow's business. Briggs shifted his weight. They're saying he's offering $500 for a girl. Dark hair, grey eyes branded. Jacob's hammer came down hard. The post sank another inch into the dirt. They're saying, Briggs continued carefully, that she's a thief, that she stole from him, that she's dangerous. She looks real dangerous lying half dead in my back room. Briggs swallowed. Jacob, I'm just telling you what folks are saying. Harrow's men are already in town. They're asking questions, and they don't ask gentle. Jacob set the hammer down and finally met the old man's eyes. You telling me I should hand her over? I'm telling you to think real hard about what you're doing. Briggs stepped back toward his horse. Some fights you can't win. And Harrow, he's not the kind of man who forgives. Jacob watched him ride off, dust rising in his wake. Inside, Anna stood in the doorway, pale and silent. She'd heard every word. You should have left me, she said flatly. Jacob turned back to the fence. Probably. He'll come for me. I know. And when he does, he'll kill you too. Jacob picked up the hammer again. Then I reckon we'd better be ready. They came 3 days later, just after sundown. Jacob heard them before he saw them. Hoofbeats rolling like thunder across the valley floor, slow and deliberate. 6 riders, maybe 7. He stood on the porch, rifle loaded, watching them crest the ridge and descend toward the cabin in a tight line. Anna stood behind him in the doorway, her breath quick and shallow. She'd barely eaten, barely slept. Every sound made her flinch. Jacob had tried to get her to tell him what happened, but she wouldn't. Just stared at the brand on her arm like it was a curse she couldn't scrub off. Stay inside, he said quietly. Jacob, stay inside. The riders stopped 20 yards out. The man in front was tall, lean, dressed in black with silver spurs that caught the last of the daylight. His face was sharp, angular, handsome in a way that made your skin crawl. He smiled like he'd already won. Jacob Thorne, the man said, voice smooth as oil. I've heard about you. Jacob didn't move. Cade Harrow. The very same. Harrow tilted his head, studying him. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't keep slaves. Harrow's smile widened. Slave's a strong word. I prefer investment. See, that girl cost me a fair amount of money, and when she ran, she took something valuable with her. He leaned forward in the saddle. Now I'm a reasonable man. You return her. I'll forget this ever happened. Hell, I'll even pay you for your trouble. She's not going anywhere. The smile faded. Harrow's eyes went cold, flat. Then we have a problem. One of the riders behind him shifted, hand drifting toward his gun. Jacob's finger moved to the trigger. 7 of you, Jacob said evenly. Maybe you take me down, but I promise you won't all ride away. Harrow studied him for a long moment. Then he laughed, a soft, dangerous sound. You know what I like about you, Thorne. You got spine. Most men would have handed her over by now, but you, he shook his head. You're the kind of fool who thinks honor still means something out here. Maybe it doesn't. Harrow straightened in his saddle. You've got until tomorrow at noon. After that I'm coming back, and I won't be asking polite. He turned his horse and rode off, the others following. Their shadows stretched long and dark across the valley as they disappeared over the ridge. Jacob stood there until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. When he turned around, Anna was sitting on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Jacob crouched down beside her. What did you take from him? She looked up, eyes red and raw. The truth that night. Anna finally spoke. They sat at the small table in the cabin, a single candle flickering between them. Jacob had made coffee, bitter and strong, and she wrapped her hands around the cup like it was the only warm thing left in the world. I wasn't always his, she began, voice barely above a whisper. I had a family once, a mother, a little brother. We had a farm south of the border. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Jacob stayed quiet, letting her find the words. Harrow came through one summer, said he was a trader, said he could get us better prices for our crops. My mother trusted him. Her jaw tightened. He took everything, the farm, the money, and when my mother fought back, she trailed off, staring into the candle flame. He killed her, right in front of me, told me I could run, or I could work off the debt. So you worked? She nodded. For 3 years, cleaning his house, serving his men, watching him destroy other families the same way he destroyed mine. Her voice cracked. And then I found the ledger. Jacob leaned forward. What ledger? Names, dates, transactions, every person he ever cheated, every family he ever ruined, every lie he ever told. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small leather-bound book, worn and stained. Proof. Enough to hang him 10 times over. Jacob stared at it. That's what he wants back. That's what he'll kill for. She set it on the table between them. I thought if I could get it to a marshal, someone who wasn't bought off, maybe it would mean something. Maybe my mother's death would mean something. Jacob picked up the ledger, flipping through the pages. Names he recognized, towns he'd passed through, crimes documented in cold, careful handwriting. Why didn't you go to the law? Anna laughed bitterly. Because half the lawmen in 3 territories are in that book. Jacob closed the ledger and looked at her, really looked at her. Beneath the fear and exhaustion, there was something else. Steel, determination, the kind of stubbornness that kept you alive when everything else said you should be dead. You could have sold this, he said quietly. Could have bought your freedom. It's not about freedom. Her eyes met his. It's about justice. Jacob set the ledger down and leaned back in his chair. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who would have traded that book for gold without a second thought, the one who believed survival was the only thing that mattered. But that man had died a long time ago, and maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to bury him for good. Then we give him justice, Jacob said. Anna stared at him, disbelief flickering across her face. You'd do that? For me? For you? For your mother? For everyone in that book? He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark valley. Harrow thinks he owns this land, thinks he owns people. Time someone reminded him he doesn't. Anna stood, walked over, and placed a hand on his arm. Her touch was light, hesitant. Thank you, she whispered. Jacob nodded once. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Noon came slow and heavy. Jacob stood in the middle of the yard, rifle in hand, the ledger tucked into his saddlebag. Anna waited inside, a pistol Jacob had given her resting on her lap. They'd talked through the plan a dozen times. It was risky, maybe even stupid, but it was the only chance they had. The riders appeared right on time, 7 of them just like before. Harrow rode at the front, that cold smile still plastered on his face. Time's up, Thorne, Harrow called out as they approached. Where's my property? She's not yours, Jacob said evenly. Never was. Harrow's smile faded. Then I guess we do this the hard way. His men started to spread out, forming a loose circle around the cabin. Jacob didn't move, didn't raise his rifle, just stood there, calm and steady. Before you do something you'll regret, Jacob said loudly. You should know that ledger of yours, the one with all your dirty little secrets. I sent it to Fort Collins, to a federal marshal, friend of mine.
Should be reading it right about now.
Harrow's expression went dark. You're bluffing, am I? Jacob reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Got the receipt right here. Paid extra for fast delivery. For the first time something flickered across Harrow's face. Doubt, fear. Even if you kill me, Jacob continued. It's done. Every name, every crime, all of it documented. "You're finished, Harrow." Harrow stared at him for a long, tense moment. Then he laughed, sharp and humorless. "You think one ledger's going to stop me? I got judges in my pocket."
Sheriffs, politicians.
"Maybe," Jacob said, "but you don't have the people, and once they see what you've done, once they read what's in that book—" He let the words hang. "You'll be lucky if you make it to trial." One of Harrow's men shifted nervously. Another muttered something under his breath. The circle was breaking. Harrow's hand moved toward his gun. Jacob's rifle came up fast. The shot echoed across the valley like a thunderclap. Harrow's gun flew from his hand, blood spraying from his fingers. He screamed, clutching his wrist, and his horse reared. The other riders scattered, hands raised, shouting that they wanted no part of it. Jacob kept the rifle trained on Harrow. "Ride out now, and if I ever see you again, I won't miss." Harrow spat blood into the dirt, his face twisted with rage and pain, but he turned his horse and rode. His men followed, leaving only dust and silence in their wake. Jacob lowered the rifle and exhaled slowly. Anna stepped out onto the porch, tears streaming down her face. She walked over to him, and without a word, wrapped her arms around him. Jacob stood there for a moment, surprised, then gently returned the embrace. "It's over," he said quietly. "Is it?" she whispered. "It is." 3 months later, a federal marshal rode into Redemption, with 6 deputies, and a warrant for Cade Harrow's arrest. They found him holed up in a saloon in Silver Creek, drunk and desperate, most of his men gone. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The ledger was entered as evidence. Harrow hanged on a Tuesday morning. Anna stayed at Jacob's ranch. She learned to mend fences, to work the land, to smile again, slowly, carefully, like someone remembering a language they'd almost forgotten. She planted flowers by the creek, the same kind her mother used to grow, and on quiet evenings, when the sun dipped low and the valley turned gold, Jacob would sit on the porch and watch her tend the garden. Sometimes she'd look up and catch him staring, and she'd smile. Years later, when people asked him why he'd risked everything for a stranger, Jacob would just shake his head and say, "She wasn't a stranger, she was someone who needed help. That's all that mattered." And Anna, standing beside him, would add softly, "He gave me something I thought I'd lost forever." "What's that?" they'd ask. She'd glance at Jacob, eyes warm and steady. "A reason to keep breathing." The valley at dusk, smoke rising from the cabin chimney, 2 figures sitting side by side on the porch, silhouettes against the dying light.